In the quiet moments after midnight, when secrets whispered in the shadows of our creaking home, I found myself wrapped in the dangerous warmth of Daniel's embrace, a forbidden intimacy that blurred the lines of family and desire. That one moment, where our eyes met and our hearts pounded in sync, would change everything, shattering old bonds and igniting a fire of regret and longing that none of us could control. Welcome back, my loyal subscribers, and a warm hello to all our viewers. I want you to know that I do not take your viewership for granted. It's because of you that this storytelling channel is alive and kicking, and am honored to share this deeply personal journey with each and every one of you. My name is Lila, and am a 22-year-old college student who has just returned home to help my mother, Mara, recover from a major surgery. As I stepped back into the familiar walls of our modest house in suburban America, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the past and the loneliness of a fractured family. My parents' divorce years ago left scars that have never fully healed, and I carried that grief with me like an old, tattered coat. Now, coming home, I hope to find some solace in caring for the person who had always been my pillar, my mother. Mara, my dear mother, is a kind and gentle soul whose smile hides the pain of her own battles. After her surgery, she's been fragile, both physically and emotionally. The house is quieter than before, the echoes of happier days now replaced with the sounds of coughs and soft, pained sighs. I've tried to fill the silence with my chatter and the occasional burst of laughter, but the sorrow lingers in the corners. Then there is Daniel, my stepfather. For as long as I can remember, I looked up to him as a mentor, a guide who helped me navigate the tumultuous years of adolescence. At 50, Daniel carries the weight of his own regrets, a troubled marriage, secrets, and unspoken loneliness. Over the years, his advice and warm presence have been a source of comfort. Yet, in these recent weeks, as I've watched him silently battle his inner demons, something in his eyes has changed. There's a hint of longing there, a desperate need for connection that mirrors my own. I never imagined that the person I once trusted implicitly could become the one who stoked a forbidden fire within me. Returning from college, I expected to find routine and a sense of normalcy. Instead, I was met with an undercurrent of tension, a delicate dance between caring duty and hidden desire. In the quiet hours after Mara went to sleep, Daniel and I began to spend more time together. At first, it was simple. We'd talk about the past, our shared regrets, and the loneliness that had haunted both of us for so long. The conversations were gentle, filled with the understanding of two souls who had lost their way. But as days turned into nights, and nights into whispers, our connection grew stronger, more electric. I remember one evening vividly. The living room was dimly lit by the soft glow of a single lamp, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Mara was resting upstairs, and the house was cloaked in silence. Daniel and I sat across from each other, our conversation drifting from everyday worries to confessions of our deepest sorrows. As the clock ticked, I noticed his eyes linger on mine, and in that quiet moment, something shifted. The distance between us evaporated, and for a heartbeat, I allowed myself to believe that I was not just a daughter in need of comfort, but a woman deserving of care and passion. I could feel my heart racing as our eyes locked, a silent agreement that our shared loneliness was the bridge between two broken hearts. The air was thick with unspoken words and dangerous possibilities. I was aware of the precarious line we were approaching, yet in that moment, nothing else mattered. The familiar comfort of Daniel's presence transformed into something more, something forbidden and overwhelming. It was as if the quiet house held its breath, waiting for the inevitable crossing of a boundary that had been hidden for far too long. And then, just as quickly as the moment had built, It dissolved into uncertainty. A sudden noise from upstairs jolted us back to reality, leaving us suspended in a painful silence filled with regret and confusion. I could only wonder how much longer we could maintain the fragile facade of normalcy before our secret would shatter the lives we had carefully constructed. As I sit here now, recounting these memories to you, I am filled with both longing and remorse. The path we are treading is fraught with consequences that I can scarcely imagine. Every heartbeat, every whispered confession has set in motion events that threaten to unravel the delicate tapestry of our lives. What will become of Mara, who has given so much, or my younger siblings, whose innocence may soon be shattered by the weight of our sins? In the quiet aftermath of that fateful evening, I stand at the precipice of an unknown future, a future where every choice carries the risk of devastation. The journey has just begun, and as we edge closer to the moment when secrets can no longer be contained, I am left with one haunting question. Can we ever go back to the way things were, or have we already crossed the point of no return? Stay tuned, dear viewers, as I continue to share this story of shattered trust, hidden passion, and the painful quest for redemption. The truth of that night still echoes in my mind, and the coming days promise revelations that will change us all forever. I never thought that returning home would stir up memories so raw and painful. Yet, as I spent more time caring for Mara, the ghosts of my past began to reappear, each one whispering reminders of our broken family. I realized that my heart was still clutching onto the wounds inflicted by my parents' divorce, a fracture that seemed to have formed when I was too young to understand the gravity of it all. Growing up, I remember how the rift between my parents cast a long, dark shadow over our lives. I would watch them argue in hushed tones, their words laced with anger and sorrow. The pain was something I carried silently, like a secret burden, even as I tried to laugh along with my friends at school. But deep down, I was lonely, feeling abandoned by the one thing that should have been constant: family. Mara, ever resilient, tried to mend the pieces of our shattered home, but I often saw her struggle behind her gentle smile. Even as I returned from college, I found that the loneliness had not left me. It had simply changed its form. It was during these quiet days of caring for my mother that I began to see Daniel in a new light. For years, he had been a steady, reassuring presence, a mentor who offered wisdom when I was lost. But lately, I could sense that his eyes held unspoken regret, a longing that seemed to mirror my own. Our conversations became more intimate, a blend of past confessions and present vulnerabilities. I'd find myself confiding in him about my lingering feelings of abandonment and the scars of that tumultuous divorce. Daniel, in turn, would share fragments of his own story: a troubled marriage, a life that felt increasingly empty despite his outward calm. One rainy afternoon, as the steady patter of raindrops provided a somber soundtrack to our conversation, I sat with Daniel in the quiet of the living room. Mara was resting, and the house was wrapped in a blanket of silence. The room felt charged, as if the air itself was carrying the weight of our confessions. I told him about the nights I would lie awake, haunted by the sound of arguments and the feeling of being left behind. His eyes softened, and for a moment, the distance between us melted away. He reached out and gently squeezed my hand, a gesture that felt both comforting and dangerous. I knew then that our connection was evolving, shifting from the role of guardian and ward to something more profound and, ultimately, more perilous. As days turned into nights, our conversations delved deeper into the darker corners of our pasts. I learned of Daniel's own regrets, the sacrifices he had made, the dreams he had let go, and the persistent ache of a love lost long ago. It was as if the loneliness we both felt was a mirror reflecting our hidden sorrows. In those moments, I felt less like a daughter seeking comfort and more like a woman craving understanding, a craving that slowly grew into something I couldn't ignore. But the shadows of the past are not easily left behind. With every shared secret and every lingering glance, memories of old wounds resurfaced. I began to see that my longing for connection was not just about filling an emptiness left by my parents' departure, but also about finding a way to heal. Yet, in that fragile healing process, the danger of crossing forbidden lines loomed ever larger. I started to question whether my search for solace was worth the price of betraying the very bonds I once held sacred. One particular evening remains etched in my memory. We were sitting on the back porch, the soft hum of the evening mixing with the cool air, as I recounted a memory of a happier time before the divorce. Daniel listened intently, his eyes reflecting a mix of empathy and melancholy. For a brief moment, it felt as if we were the only two people in the world, united by our shared isolation. But the silence that followed was heavy, a reminder that beneath our confessions lay the unspoken truth of our desires. I felt the weight of every secret, every painful memory, pressing down on me. It was in that moment I realized that our closeness was transforming into something more intense than either of us had anticipated. I began to notice subtle signs that someone might be watching us, a whispered word outside a window, a knock on the door at odd hours. The fear of discovery crept in, gnawing at the edges of our newfound intimacy. My younger siblings, unaware of the storm brewing behind closed doors, continued to play in the halls, their laughter a bittersweet contrast to the heavy conversations in the living room. I wondered how much longer we could keep our secrets hidden before the weight of the past and the consequences of our choices would come crashing down upon us. In the quiet solitude of those days, I was forced to confront the fact that our deepening bond was built on the ruins of broken trust. The shadows of the past had followed us home, mingling with our present and threatening to destroy whatever fragile hope of healing we had begun to nurture. As I lay awake at night, the silence of the house became a canvas for my fears that our secret connection would not only unravel our lives, but also leave irreparable scars on everyone we held dear. I stand at a crossroads now, caught between the comfort of shared loneliness and the peril of our forbidden closeness. With every conversation, every tender touch, I can feel the past intertwining with the present, forming a tapestry that is both beautiful and tragically flawed. And as the shadows of yesterday continue to haunt me, I wonder if there will ever be a way to escape the echoes of our past, or if we are doomed to repeat our mistakes in a cycle of hurt and longing. Stay with me as I continue this journey of truth and revelation. The coming days promise more challenges, more secrets, and decisions that may alter the course of our lives forever. I still remember that night as if it were etched into my very soul. It began like any other evening, with the soft hum of the house settling into quiet as dusk turned to night. Mara was asleep in her room, and my siblings were tucked away in their beds, leaving the house empty enough for secrets to slip through the cracks. Daniel and I found ourselves alone again in the living room, our conversation meandering through the familiar territory of shared regrets and quiet loneliness. But that night, something shifted. As we sat close, our words grew softer, and the air between us thickened with unspoken tension. Daniel's eyes, usually kind and steady, held a fire that mirrored my own inner turmoil, a mix of longing, desperation, and the unyielding need for solace. I felt the pull of that forbidden desire, a temptation that grew stronger with every shared confession, every lingering glance. It was as if the shadows on the wall were urging us to give in to what we both desperately wanted, despite knowing it was wrong. I remember the precise moment when the line was crossed. We were discussing a particularly painful memory from my childhood, a memory of isolation and heartbreak that left me feeling raw and exposed. Daniel reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it brushed against mine. In that simple, electric touch, I sensed a spark, an invitation that promised relief from the burdens of my past. My heart pounded in my chest, and before I could fully grasp the consequences, our eyes met in a way that said everything without a single word. In that heartbeat, the familiar roles we had played for so long dissolved, leaving behind only a dangerous, intense connection. The moment was both thrilling and terrifying. I felt a rush of warmth flood through me, an intoxicating blend of passion and guilt that left me reeling. I knew that what we were doing was a betrayal of the trust that had once defined our relationship and the family I had hoped to rebuild. Yet, in that moment, my need for comfort and the promise of a kindred spirit overpowered the nagging voice of reason. I let my guard down completely, surrendering to the overwhelming desire that had built up inside me over countless lonely nights. Our conversation fell away, replaced by the language of touch and whispered confessions. The world outside our small living room ceased to exist. In the flickering light of the lamp, Daniel's face softened as he pulled me closer. I could feel the steady beat of his heart against my cheek, and in that vulnerable moment, the boundaries of right and wrong blurred into insignificance. It felt as if the universe had conspired to offer us a brief reprieve from the pain of our separate lives, a reprieve that came with a price I hadn't yet realized. I struggled with an inner battle as passion overtook me. Every fiber of my being screamed that this was wrong, that I was risking everything I had ever known. But at the same time, the intensity of my feelings made me believe that this forbidden connection was exactly what I needed to fill the void left by years of isolation and heartbreak. I was torn between the desperate desire to feel loved and the creeping terror of the inevitable fallout. My mind raced with thoughts of my mother's gentle smile, the laughter of my younger siblings, and the quiet home that now felt so fragile and precarious. In the heat of that night, our lips met in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a kiss that signified the final step beyond the boundaries we once knew. The sensation was overwhelming. It was a moment of surrender to a force that I had been fighting against for far too long. And as the kiss deepened, I felt the full weight of what we were doing crashing down upon me. Every kiss, every caress was a reminder of the betrayal I was committing, yet I could not stop myself. The forbidden nature of our act only added fuel to the fire burning between us. As our passion grew, so did my inner turmoil. I felt like I was standing on a knife's edge, balancing between the ecstasy of being seen and cherished and the crushing guilt that threatened to engulf me. I knew that once we crossed this line, nothing would ever be the same. The warmth of our bodies together promised comfort, but it also carried the potential for unimaginable heartbreak. I could hear the echoes of my past mistakes whispering warnings in the back of my mind, urging me to step back and remember who I once was, a daughter, a sister, someone who deserved a life free from such scandal. Just when I thought I could no longer bear the weight of my emotions, a sudden sound startled us both, a soft knock on the front door that shattered the heavy silence. In that split second, every instinct in me screamed to freeze, to hide what we had done. My heart sank as I realized that our secret, so carefully hidden in the quiet hours of the night, was now in danger of being exposed. I looked at Daniel, fear and regret mingling in his eyes. We both knew that this moment marked the point of no return. The line had been crossed, and now the consequences of our actions would soon ripple through every part of our lives. In that tense moment, as the knock repeated softly, I felt the full force of our choices crashing down upon me. My mind raced with thoughts of Mara, of my younger siblings, and of a future that now seemed irreparably shattered. I could only wonder what would happen next, who might be at the door, and what secrets would soon be laid bare for everyone to see. And so, as the knock echoed in the stillness of our troubled home, I was left to face the terrifying reality. We had stepped into a dangerous unknown, and the fallout of our actions was poised to shatter everything we once held dear. In the days that followed that fateful night, the fragile facade of our family began to crumble. Every quiet corner of the house whispered secrets, and every familiar face now seemed painted with suspicion and sorrow. I could feel the weight of our actions pressing down on us, a relentless reminder that the choices made in darkness were now coming to light. It started with small signs, a misplaced glance, an accidental mention of late-night conversations, and the growing tension in Mara's eyes as she tried to hide her worry. I sensed that something was off. Mara, who had always been the steady heart of our home, seemed distant and guarded. Even my younger siblings, who once filled the halls with carefree laughter, now watched us with uncomprehending eyes, as if they too were starting to sense the storm brewing beneath the surface. One evening, as I was tidying up the living room after a long, sleepless night spent wrestling with guilt, I noticed Mara sitting in her favorite armchair. Her eyes, red from tears she tried hard to hide, fixed on me with a mix of love and pain. "Lila, can we talk?" she asked softly. My heart sank, and I knew that the unthinkable was about to happen. In that moment, the home that I had returned to with the hope of healing became a stage for confrontation. Mara's voice trembled as she recounted little details, a whisper from a hallway conversation, the sound of my soft sighs at odd hours. The evidence was pieced together slowly, but it was enough to ignite the spark of betrayal in her eyes. "I trusted you," she said, the words heavy with disappointment. "I trusted all of you." I tried to speak, to explain the loneliness, the pain, the desperate search for solace that had driven me into the arms of the one person I never imagined would hurt us so deeply. But the words caught in my throat, replaced by a bitter silence. Across the room, Daniel stood motionless, his face a mask of regret and shock. His eyes, once full of quiet understanding, now burned with the realization of the devastation his actions had caused. I saw him struggle to speak, his voice barely a whisper. "I never meant to hurt you, Mara," he pleaded, his words trembling in the charged air. But it was too late. The cracks in our family's foundation were widening, and nothing could reverse the damage done. As the confrontation escalated, emotions spilled over like a tidal wave. My siblings, sensing the intensity of the moment, gathered in the hallway, their innocent eyes wide with confusion and fear. Their silent questions pierced the air, making the betrayal even more poignant. I felt the weight of their unspoken disappointment, a burden I knew would haunt me for years to come. That night, the house was transformed into a battleground of shattered trust and fractured self-worth. Every whispered accusation, every tearful cry, echoed the profound loss we were all experiencing. The very walls of our homes seemed to close in, trapping us in a moment of irreversible change. I sat there, caught between the desperate need to explain and the crushing reality of the consequences, my heart torn asunder by the knowledge that our secret had unleashed a cascade of pain. In the days that followed, the fallout spread like wildfire. Mara's trust in both of us was shattered, and her once gentle spirit hardened into a shell of grief and anger. Daniel, who had been my mentor and guide, now moved through the days with a haunted look in his eyes, his silence a constant reminder of the price he had paid for his forbidden affection. The bond we had shared, once a source of comfort and connection, had become the catalyst for our collective unraveling. I tried to find solace in moments of solitude, but even then, the echoes of that night haunted me. Each quiet moment was invaded by the memories of Daniel's touch, the warmth of his embrace that had felt both like salvation and damnation. I replayed every moment in my mind, desperately searching for a way to justify the betrayal that had so thoroughly upended our lives. Yet, the more I tried to rationalize, the clearer it became that there was no excuse for what we had done. The collateral damage extended far beyond just the two of us. My younger siblings, once carefree and bright, began to mirror the uncertainty and sadness that now permeated our home. Their once vibrant energy was dampened by an unspoken understanding that something precious had been lost. And Mara, my beloved mother, whose every sacrifice was now overshadowed by the heartbreak of betrayal, withdrew into a solitude that left the house echoing with silence. One evening, as I sat alone in my room trying to make sense of the chaos, I heard footsteps approaching. I knew that Daniel had come to speak with me, perhaps to seek some form of redemption or to share in the burden of our shared guilt. In the dim light of the corridor, his eyes met mine, and I saw there the torment of a man who had lost everything in a moment of weakness. "We need to fix this," he said softly, his voice laced with desperation. But how could we fix something so irreparably broken? That conversation, filled with more questions than answers, left me with a haunting uncertainty. Was there any path to redemption, or were we doomed to live the rest of our lives under the shadow of this betrayal? The uncertainty gnawed at me, the thought that every moment we had once cherished was now tainted by our mistake. Now, as I reflect on these events, I can't help but feel that the unraveling of our family is just beginning. Each day brings a new wave of regret and sorrow, and the promise of healing seems as distant as a forgotten dream. The bonds that once held us together have been stretched to their breaking point, and I fear that the scars left behind may never truly fade. Stay with me as I continue this painful journey, as I search for answers in the midst of heartbreak and come to terms with the irrevocable damage we have caused. The path ahead is uncertain, and every step is fraught with the consequences of our actions, but I must keep moving forward, even if the cost is the very soul of our family. In the wake of shattered trust and endless regret, I found myself standing at the edge of a precipice, one that promised either the bitter sting of eternal sorrow or the slow, painful journey toward healing. The days after our secret was revealed were a blur of heartache and remorse. Our once familiar home, filled with echoes of laughter and warmth, had become a silent monument to betrayal and loss. Every corner of the house held memories of what we had been, and every shadow reminded me of what we had lost. I spent countless hours alone in my room, wrestling with the consequences of that fateful night and the choices that led us to this point. I knew that healing would not come quickly or easily, but I was determined to seek some form of redemption, even if it meant facing the darkest parts of my own heart. My guilt was a constant companion, and the sound of my mother's quiet sobs at night, the looks of hurt in my younger siblings' eyes, and the silent regret in Daniel's gaze all served as reminders that our lives had been forever altered. One chilly morning, as I sat by the window watching the soft light of dawn break over the horizon, I realized that the first step toward redemption was acceptance. I needed to face the truth of what we had done and take responsibility for the pain it had caused. With trembling resolve, I reached out to Mara. I wanted to apologize, to let her know that I understood the magnitude of my betrayal and that I was ready to begin the long process of making amends. It was one of the hardest conversations I have ever had. Mara's eyes were filled with sorrow and a hint of forgiveness, but the hurt was still too fresh to fully mend the broken pieces of our family. Daniel, too, began his journey of reckoning. He spent long, sleepless nights reflecting on the choices he had made. I witnessed him standing alone in the kitchen at odd hours, his silhouette framed by the dim light, as if he were searching for a way out of the darkness that had swallowed him. We talked in whispers, sharing our regrets and fears, slowly piecing together a fragile understanding of the need for change. It became clear that redemption was not about erasing the past, but about learning to live with it and striving to do better in the future. As the days turned into weeks, our family started taking the first tentative steps toward healing. I began attending counseling sessions both alone and with the family in a desperate bid to understand our tangled emotions and to learn how to forgive, not only each other but ourselves as well. My siblings, though young, were given space to express their feelings in safe, supportive settings, and Mara worked hard to reclaim the spark that had once lit up our home. Despite our best efforts, there were moments when the pain seemed too much to bear. The house would fall silent, heavy with unspoken words, and I would lie awake at night, haunted by memories of that fateful night. Yet, amidst the sorrow, small moments of hope began to emerge. A smile shared over a meal, a quiet conversation in the living room, or a simple act of kindness served as reminders that we were still capable of love. Every act, no matter how small, was a step toward mending the broken parts of our hearts. For me, the journey was the hardest of all. I had to learn to accept that some wounds might never fully heal, that the echoes of our past would always linger like a distant, sorrowful melody. But I also discovered that in the process of facing our darkest secrets, we could find a way to grow. I began to write about my experiences, pouring my heart into journals, and even sharing parts of my story with others who had faced similar betrayals. It was a painful catharsis, a way of turning our shared mistakes into lessons for the future. Even as we worked to rebuild our lives, the road ahead remained uncertain. There were days when the burden of regret felt overwhelming, and moments when I questioned if true redemption was ever possible. But in those moments, I reminded myself that healing is not a destination but a journey. And in that journey, every step, no matter how painful, was a testament to our strength and our hope for a better tomorrow. As I share this final chapter of our story with you, I stand before you not as a perfect person, but as someone who has learned that redemption comes from facing the truth, accepting our scars, and choosing to move forward despite the pain. I invite you to join me on this continuing journey of healing and understanding. If you found this story moving, or if you believe in the power of forgiveness and growth, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me, and it helps keep our community alive and hopeful for a brighter future.